Yes, Ms Diaz.
Commissioner, the next witness is Mr Stephen Kluss from Suncorp.
Yes. You mind coming into the witness box? And may I ask you whether you would prefer to make an oath or take an affirmation?
Affirmation.
Yes, affirm. Witness, please.
I solemnly and sincerely
I solemnly and sincerely
declare and affirm
declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give,
will be the truth,
the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Do sit down.
Thank you.
Yes, Kirk.
Thank you, Commissioner. Your name is Stephen John Kluss.
That's correct.
Your professional address is 266 George Street, Brisbane.
That's correct, yes.
Your position is you are the Executive General Manager Lending at Suncorp Group.
That's correct, yes.
You have been summoned to give evidence in this hearing of the Royal Commission.
Yes,
Do you have a copy or the original of the summons there with you?
I do.
I tender that summons, Commissioner.
Exhibit 3.156 will be the summons to Mr Kluss.
Mr Kluss, at the request of the Commission, you have prepared a statement for this case study.
That's correct.
Are the contents of that statement true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, it is.
I tender that statement, Commissioner.
Exhibit 3.157 is the statement of Mr Kluss.
Please, Commissioner.
Thank you. Yes, Ms Diaz.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr Kluss, you are the Executive General Manager of Lending at Suncorp Group, is that correct?
Yes,
And you've held that role since December 2016.
that's correct, yes.
And you're responsible for pricing, products and process of all lending issued by Suncorp, including business lending.
Yes,
You've been put forward to give evidence today and in your witness statement about Suncorp's response to the extension of the unfair contracts terms legislation to small business lending contracts.
yes.
And I'll refer to that as the UCT.
Yeah, that'd be great.
provisions.
Thank you.
Now, Suncorp defines small business lending to mean lending to customers where they have a total business-related exposure of less than 1 million. Is that correct?
Yes,
Now, you're aware that on 12 November 2015, legislation was passed which amended the ASIC Act to extend the UCT provisions to small businesses.
yes,
And you're aware that the legislation had the effect of providing a 12-month transition period, Mr
yes,
Kluss?
yes,
So that is, entities like Suncorp had 12 months before the amendments came into effect to bring their contracts into compliance.
that's correct, yes.
And the new protections apply to standard form small business contracts where the upfront price payable under the contract does not exceed $300,000 or $1 million if the contract is for more than 12 months.
Yes, that's.
You understand that?
Yes, I do.
And where a contract is automatically renewed on or after 12 November 2016, you understand that the protections apply from the date of the renewal.
Yes,
Now, broadly speaking, do you understand that the legislation provides that a term is unfair if, for instance, it would cause a significant imbalance in the parties' rights and obligations under the contract? The term is not reasonably necessary to protect legitimate interests of the party
yes,
that would benefit from its inclusion,
yeah,
and the term would cause financial or other detriment, such as delay, to a small business if it was applied or relied on.
yes,
Now, in February 2016, Mr Kluss, ASIC released an information sheet which provided guidance around the UCT laws. I'll bring that up so to see that you can have a look at that. That's ASIC.0900.0002.0041. Now, I don't think this is an exhibit to your statement, Mr Kluss. Sorry, we'll have to wait for it to come on the screen. Thank you. So, have you seen this before, Mr Kluss?
no, I haven't, no.
But Suncorp monitors ASIC publications
That's
to
right.
keep abreast of ones that might affect Suncorp's business, such as
Yes.
small business lending.
Yes,
Okay, and you can see there that it says in the second paragraph, before the law comes into effect, and that is reference to the UCT provisions, ASIC expects businesses to review their standard form small business contracts to remove any terms that could be considered to be unfair to ensure compliance by 12 November 2016. Do you see that?
I
Mr.
do,
Kluss?
yes,
Now, you're aware that some of the terms that ASIC told banks, including Suncorp, that would be considered unfair include terms that give lenders a very broad discretion to vary unilaterally
Yes.
their terms,
Yes.
and terms that provide for a default of a loan, such as a non-monetary default, in a very broad range of circumstances, rather than where the borrower is materially defaulted on their financial obligations. You're aware of that?
Yes.
And terms that too broadly indemnify the lender, such as Suncorp, against losses, costs, liabilities, expenses.
That's correct. Yes.
You're aware of that. Now, you have exhibited some correspondence between Suncorp and ASIC to your statement, Mr.
Yes.
Kluss, between September 2016 and April 2017. Now, from about that time, the start of that period, ASIC told Suncorp that it wanted to ensure that Suncorp's contracts did not contain any unfair terms. That's correct?
That's correct. Yes.
And ASIC sought copies of some of those contracts. Is that correct?
They did. Yes. They asked on the 7th. Yes.
Now, you exhibit one of the requests to your statement. That's Exhibit 13, Mr. Kluss. That's sun.1101.0002.0766.
Sorry, what was the number again?
Now, there's an email at the front, which
Yes.
is from an ASIC representative, and then there's a letter attached to that email, Mr. Kluss, and that is
Yes.
sun.1101.002.0766. Do you
Yes.
see that?
I've got that.
Thank you. I'll just call out that doc ID again. It's sun.1101.0002.0766. Sorry. Now, if it can't be brought up, Mr. Kluss, I'll take you through it.
Yes. Okay.
Now, that's a letter dated 7 September 2016.
Yes.
You can see that.
Yes.
And there's a paragraph there, thank you, in the middle where it says ASIC has been working with industry and businesses and has released guidelines to help them understand the new protections and how they may be impacted by them. ASIC has conveyed its expectations to industry that industry start reviewing standard form contracts before the commencement date. And then there's a list of some of the terms that ASIC has concerns about. You can see that there.
Yes.
So down the bottom of the letter, sorry, I should have said this. To this end, we request that you provide us with a copy of your standard form lending agreement, and you exhibit the response that was made to that request on the 14th of September 2016. That's Exhibit 14. And that's sun.1101.0002.0558. Yes, 19th of October.
Yes.
Oh, well,
got that.
14th of September, sorry, where Mr. Turner says from Suncorp to the ASIC representative, please find attached.
That's right.
Yes. And then ASIC then wrote back to Suncorp on the 19th seeking further information. There's a letter attached to that exhibit, Mr. Kluss, and that's dated the 19th of October. Can you see that? sun.1101.0002.0561.
Yes, I can see that.
So you can see in that letter, I'll read that out because it may not come up on the screen, Mr. Kluss, that ASIC's identified a number of terms they want to examine a bit more closely to get a better understanding, and they've asked for a detailed explanation from Suncorp of those terms.
That's correct. Yes.
Now, Suncorp requested a bit of an extension to provide that explanation, is that right? And ASIC also in the interim requested further information. And that's the next exhibit, Mr.
Yeah.
Kluss.
Sorry. Can you repeat that?
Suncorp requested an extension to provide that information, and in the meantime, ASIC requested further information from Suncorp.
That's correct. Yes.
And then ASIC requests for further explanation of the contracts, and I will take you to some of that further explanation. And that's at sun.1101.0002.0567.
And what tab, sorry?
Tab 16.
Yes, this is our response.
Yes. And this is in respect of, and we might just put the next page up. It's a landscape page. And that's 0568. So ASIC had requested clarification about this clause in the credit contract term loan, and Suncorp responded that whilst there is arguably potential for this term to cause an imbalance in the rights and obligations of the parties and to cause detriment to the borrower if it were applied or relied on, Suncorp considers this term is reasonably necessary to protect its interests. And then just a bit further down, Suncorp has written, the bank would always act reasonably in its assessment of what constitutes a material adverse change in any particular circumstance. Now, with those clauses, Mr. Kluss, some of those still exist in some of the present contracts, is that correct? You've now changed the credit contract, but there are other contracts that still contain that sort of clause without the word reasonable.
There may be, yes.
Yes. I just wanted to clarify with you about how you think customers understand those clauses and whether they do comprehend them in the way Suncorp anticipates, that they will not necessarily know that Suncorp is intending to exercise its rights only in an event that it considers reasonable. That's not clear on the face of the clause. Do you agree?
I don't necessarily agree. I don't believe it's. I don't believe a customer would think that. It's not necessarily unfair, I believe.
But you did make changes to that credit contract, did you not?
We did, yes. Yes. We saw the opportunity there to improve the clause.
Are you saying that you didn't think it was non-compliant, even though ASIC had said that it was?
I believe Access gave us guidance. I think it was up to us to make our judgment on the act.
Okay. Mr. Kluss, I'll take you to another letter that ASIC sent through, or that Suncorp sent through in response to a request for information, and that's at tab 18 of your statement, and that's sun.1101.0002.0742. And this is a letter from 10 February 2017. And it's 0743.
03.
That's where we see ASIC has expressed the view that's set out in the first column, that in ASIC's view it will be desirable for that clause to be amended to include that reasonableness requirement. And Suncorp expresses the view that it will consider the proposed change and engage with relevant stakeholders. Now, who did Suncorp engage with? Who are the relevant stakeholders?
So that'd be the working group. We would have also engaged with our risk team and our compliance team. Would have reviewed this.
And do you agree they came to the conclusion that ASIC's suggestion is correct, that to comply, those words need to be incorporated?
Yes, they did. Yes.
And when were those changes made, Mr. Kluss?
They were made. They started being made on the General Security Agreement, so that was in May 2017, and then there was further changes to the credit contract and the continuous credit facility, and they were both made in August 2017.
So that's over a year, and in some instances a year and a half after ASIC had told Suncorp and other entities that they should be changing their contracts.
That's correct.
And can you explain the delay to the Commission?
Yes, well, firstly, I need to explain probably the timeline here. So yes, we had a working group that started on this project, on this journey, and that started back in February 2016. And there was a number of documents that had to be reviewed at that time. So there was a lot of deposit products, and also too there was the small business lending contracts, but some of those had already been updated in the consumer UCT in 2010. So that's how the piece of work started. We were well on our way to reviewing all those contracts, etc. And then we got to this period here in September 2016 through to April 2017, where we were taking guidance and we had correspondence with ASIC, and it did provide the opportunity to us to review to see where we could improve some of the clauses that we already had in our contracts.
Mr. Kluss, the legislation came into effect in November, or was passed in November 2015.
Mm-hmm.
So you had from that time, that's over 2 years
Yeah.
to implement these changes. And the contracts that you've exhibited to your statement occupy maybe 2 folders worth. And you're saying that it took that long and to complete that review, which is still yet to be completed.
Yeah, and our view is that these contracts are fair, and the clauses within them, while there's opportunities for us to improve those clauses, they provide a balance and clarity for our customers. I think there was a bit of complexity here when we moved through that December through to May, where there was other things changing in the industry. So we had the Carnell inquiry. We also had the Code of Banking practice with the ABA announcing they were looking at that. So that there was times there where we had to consider other things that were happening to ensure that we were taking in all the information that was happening in the market.
And how is it that you say that the Carnell inquiry or the banking code would have impacted on your ability to review the contracts?
Well, I think they provided more information for us to digest.
But you were still in a position to review these contracts, were you not?
Yes, and we
and
were.
Make these changes.
And we were reviewing them. But in saying that too, I do agree that our process to review contracts, to make recommendations internally, and to have those approved and put into production were too long. I certainly agree with that.
I see. Mr. Kluss, I'll just take you through to some of you mentioned that working group. I'll take you through to some of that, what's been exhibited to your statement from the working group and their documents. Now, one of those is at Exhibit 22, and that's SUN.1101.0001.0766. Commissioner, I might pause there and ask the media release that I had called up before be tendered. That's ASIC.0900.002.0041. Oh, information sheet. Apologise.
Exhibit 3.158 is UCT Contract Term Protections Information Sheet, ASIC 090000020041.
Thank you, Commissioner. Now, Mr. Kluss, you've seen this before you exhibit to your statement. Are you a member of the committee, the Banking and Wealth Operational Risk Committee?
Yes, I am.
So this is dated 24 April 2017. We'll see if we can pull that up on the screen. It's SUN.1101.0001.0766. So you can see that document, can you, Mr. Kluss?
Yes, I've got that
Yes.
here, 0766.
Thank you. I'll just commence reading it and we'll wait for it to come on the screen. So you can see there, under the title Facts, there's the words, UCT work is continuing with the review of remaining documents, including equipment financing agreements, the letter of offer, and our mortgage covenants. These will be reviewed in light of the changes made to the credit contracts as a result of ASIC's review to ensure consistency with the credit contracts. When the mortgage covenants are finalised, the GSA will also need to be revisited. And then further down, given this additional security by ASIC and as some of our security documents, including the GSA, it's the General Security Agreement, is that correct, Mr. Kluss?
General Security Agreement, yes.
And mortgage covenants have not yet been reviewed in relation to non-monetary defaults. It is recommended that a procedure for collections/recoveries be introduced where consultation with legal is required prior to non-monetary default clauses being relied on. Now, is this procedure still adopted for contracts that haven't yet been reviewed, Mr. Kluss?
Yes.
Is it a formal procedure? Is it something that staff are trained to adopt?
Yes, that's correct, yeah. We have trained our people.
And are there documents of this procedure?
There is a communication that steps that out, but this team is a very small team, the team that deals with this, so it's the team are very aware of the responsibility here.
And by
process.
team, do you mean
The
this
recoveries
committee?
team, the recoveries team.
The recoveries team, I
Yeah.
see.
Who
And
deal with all these matters.
I see. Are customers told of this? Are customers told on the website
No,
and in PDSs?
no.
So as far as the customer knows, they look at a contract and they look at the clause and they think that's the way the bank will exercise its rights.
That might be the case, yes.
So in effect, Suncorp is content to remain non-compliant with the UCT provisions in these respects.
I object.
Yeah.
That question presupposes a legal conclusion. First, this witness is not a lawyer. Secondly, ultimately, that conclusion is one only capable of being reached by a court. And thirdly, it has not been established that, in his opinion, any of these provisions are contrary to the UCT provisions.
I can rephrase, Commissioner.
Sorry.
Do you agree, Mr. Kluss, that what is said there in this committee minute or memo is that Suncorp is conceding that it must adopt this process of consulting with its lawyers before acting on an unmonetary default clause because it is potentially going to be in breach of the UCT legislation if the clause was unfair?
No, we believe our contracts are fair, and while there's conditions that may exist that can be improved, we believe that they are fair also. What we did here was make sure that the fact that we hadn't updated some of our contracts, that we wanted to ensure that our customers had protection, and that if there was any chance of us considering executing or enforcing a non-monetary default, that our legal team would review that. And that was for a number of reasons. One was to ensure that that the legal team, not just taking in the UCT, but also they were taking into consideration any changes that were going on in the market at the moment. For instance, now they would be considering Form 565 from ASIC, their guidance, when they're making any decisions. They'd also be considering the Carnell inquiry and some of their recommendations, and also to any code of practice work. So it did allow us to provide a broader view to what was going on. And I can say over this period and right back until the 1st of November 2016, Suncorp has not enforced a non-monetary default on any small business customer under $1 million.
I see. And is it your position, just to recap on what you said there, that Suncorp believes these terms are fair?
Yes, our current contracts are fair.
Okay. And compliant with the legislation, is that what you're saying?
And compliant, but acknowledging the fact that there may be opportunities for us, which we've shown with the contracts that we've reviewed and put in production, that there's an opportunity for us to improve the wording, provide more clarity with those, and make sure that we have the right balance between the parties.
Okay. Well, we'll just go to the next page of that document at 0767, Mr. Kluss. Sun.1101.0001.0767. And I'll read that out for you, Mr. Kluss. You have it there, do you? Under the,
Yes.
the words customer consideration. Introducing a procedure for recoveries and collections to consult legal where there is a non-monetary default other than insolvency scenario will reduce the risk of us relying on a clause that could be unfair. Recoveries, collections teams generally consult with legal even now for such defaults. However, having it formalised will ensure compliance and consistency in treatment.
Yeah.
And then further below, we run the risk that certain clauses in our documents are at risk of being unfair until we finalise our review. Now, that's a clear statement of the position as Suncorp understood it, is that correct?
Yeah,
That these
yes.
clauses do run the risk of being unfair.
They may, but as I said, a lot of this is open to opinion and interpretation, and this is us just making sure that we're being prudent.
I see. Now, Mr. Kluss, I'll just take you to another one of those committee reports, and that's at sun.1101.001.0743, and that's just behind where you were, Mr. Kluss.
Yes, you got
Can you
that?
see that one? It's the 30 October 2017.
Yes.
And you've seen this one before as well. This is one of
Yes,
the
I have.
reports that you're the member of the committee as well.
I am, yes.
And under the heading second line of defence commentary, there's the comment, where there is a heightened risk that our documents still contain terms which are unfair. This risk will continue until we finalise our review. We endorse the working group that will consider the Code of Banking Practice and Carnell requirements and provide a recommended position. Review of the remaining documents for compliance with UCT must also be given priority to ensure risk is managed. So doesn't this contain an acknowledgement, Mr. Kluss, that there is a recognition there's a heightened risk these contracts contain unfair terms and they haven't been reviewed or amended?
Yes, but again, it's not saying that they are unfair. They're making sure that we're aware that there may be a heightened risk because of the amount of changes that have gone on in the industry. But you know, to my knowledge, these are not unfair, but they can be improved.
But if the review's not conducted, you can't reach that conclusion as to whether they're fair or not.
Yes, but we've...
Do you agree with that, Mr. Kluss?
No, I don't. We've had these contracts in place for many years. We haven't had any legal challenge in relation to those contracts, to my knowledge. And again, this is down to interpretation. But I'm not a lawyer, and I'm sure there may be different arguments there, but that's my interpretation.
But you know that ASIC has told Suncorp that it considers many of these clauses to be unfair and has requested changes. But changes have not yet been made. Is that correct, Mr. Kluss?
We haven't made the change to the 13G, which is the event of default clause through all of our contracts. No, but again, we agreed to do that, and the opportunity is that our intention is to make those changes. But it's not to say that the existing clause that's there is unfair.
Well, I want to take you to a 2016 document, Mr. Kluss. This is Exhibit 22 to your statement. Sun.1101.0009.0780.
Sorry, what tab's that?
Sorry, that's tab 22. There's a
It's
little bundle there. You'll have to rifle through. I'm sorry. It's about in the middle of it. It's sun.1101.0009.0780. Oh, my apologies. Tab 20, Mr.
Okay,
Kluss.
yeah.
Apologies. I think that's right. Oh, no, I was right the first time, Mr. Kluss. It's 22.
Okay.
Sorry. It's got the title, it's dated 9 November 2016. Does that help?
9 November 2016.
It's on the screen as well, Mr. Kluss.
Yep, I can see that.
Thank you. Now, you can see there are some facts stated under the heading Facts. And it says there, effective 12 November 2016, Suncorp is required to ensure all new contracts comply with the requirements of UCT for small business. And there are some there's the contracts it applies to. And further below, Suncorp is required to review all standard small business contracts. Now, these two requirements have not been met. Is that correct, Mr. Kluss? Suncorp has not reviewed all standard small business contracts, has it?
No.
And we see there the requirement to remove all UCTs or justify the basis, and that hasn't been done yet, has it, Mr. Kluss?
I'll just read this for a second, okay? Yes, we've done that on some of our contracts, but...
Some of them, not
yeah,
all of
but
them.
not all of them, no.
No. And the next bullet point, ensure only revised contracts are in place. That has not been done to date. Is that correct?
No.
And ensure variations to contracts incorporate UCT obligations. That has not been done to date.
What was that, sorry?
The next one down, Mr. Kluss.
No, that's correct. And I'll provide some context here.
Yes.
Okay, so this period is when we are moving forward with our review of our contracts, but we're also at the same time we're communicating with ASIC over this period.
Well, I'm
so
talking about today, Mr. Kluss.
Yeah.
These things have not been done today. They were set down in November 2016 by Suncorp, and they haven't been achieved today. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And the next bullet point, ensure staff are trained and understand how to deal with complaints or challenges to the terms or conditions of any standard form contracts. Has that taken place, Mr. Kluss?
I can't confirm if that has or not, sorry.
I see. Okay, and on the next page we see, or apologies, the final page, we see some timelines for the amendment of contracts. That's 0783, thank you.
Yep.
Now, we see these are the contracts that were meant to be amended and reviewed by the end of November 2016. Is that right, Mr. Kluss?
Yes, that was the flight plan, and they were to be reviewed and amended if required.
Yes. Now, the letter of offer, memorandum of common provisions for the mortgage and trade finance agreements, these have not been changed to date.
No, they haven't.
That's correct.
Just to clarify that, with the letter of offer, the letter of offer does have the general security agreement, which has been updated in May 17, is attached to a letter of offer when it's provided, and most of the conditions, non-monetary conditions, are housed in the general security agreement.
And some of those contracts that haven't been updated will contain clauses that may fall foul of the UCT legislation. Is that correct, Mr. Kluss?
They may, but as I said, that we believe those conditions are fair, but can be improved.
Well, can be improved or must be rendered compliant with the UCT laws, as ASIC has instructed you to do. Is that correct?
My take on that is that to improve the balance and the clarity of those. To say that they are unfair, I don't know if that's the case or not.
No further questions, Mr. Kluss.
Yes. Good.
No re-examination, Commissioner.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kluss. You may step down. You're excused. Yes, Mr. Hodge.
Commissioner, the last witness is Mr. Gregson from the ACCC. Would it be convenient to adjourn for 3 minutes so we can rotate the council around?
Come back at 10:02.
Thank you.